Let's call this committee meeting to order. It's about 7 minutes after noon on July 26th. And let's do roll call. We'll start with Mr. Dunbar.
Forrest Dunbar.
Pete Peterson.
Dean Gates, Cindy Kempson.
Amy Solberg. Natalie Wilson.
Dennis Wheeler, Resource Data.
Okay.
Carolyn Hall.
And Carolyn, all right.
Members of the public.
Members of the public?
Eugene Carl Haberman, Observer.
And so, Mr. Allen, if you do, Mr. Chairman, we want to note for the record that we don't have a quorum.
Right. We don't have a quorum today, so we're not going to be taking any action, but we are going to discuss some information and get an update from Mr. Wheeler and possibly Amy and Carolyn about the communication plan. So let's go to our new business, the special municipal election update. Is that, are you going to give that to us, Dennis?
Yes, thank you, Mr.
All right,
Chairman.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. As of this morning, we have run 2,501 envelopes. Not all of those envelopes were translated into counted ballots, depending on whether the voters made some mistakes or were not otherwise eligible. But that's about where we are in terms of the total number of envelopes. The number of ballots should be close to that. We have not had any problems of any significance. We are seeing good compliance by the voters. We've had very few problems with voters not signing their envelopes. We've only had 2 envelopes where they had 2 ballots in each so far, which is a problem for us. So we'll continue through outreach to remind people to use the return envelope that they were given and not, for example, husband and wife combining them into one. I know from their perspective that might save postage, but it's a problem for ours. So we're going to continue to message that.
So are the people, when you contacted them, are they saying that the reason they're doing that is to save the stamp?
I'm just making an assumption. I haven't contacted those voters specifically. That's just an assumption on my part. But these last 2 I didn't check. They may have been Dropbox.
Oh, okay.
But I'm assuming someone would consider doing that.
Right.
In terms of Dropbox usage, we have added a couple of Dropboxes to selections, including City Hall and West High School. Right now, USAC is still leading in terms of the Dropbox locations, followed by Diamond High School and then West High School location.
Can you speak louder because I'm hearing?
I will try to. Right now, we are seeing a drop-off in the number of envelopes coming in, and this is expected based on prior experience both here and in other jurisdictions. We had a little over 700 in day 1, 700 in day 2, roughly dropping from there in each day. We expect that will pick up as we get closer to the end date, August 7th. So Friday before Monday, day of election, the day after, we expect those lines to pick up a little bit. And otherwise, no news is good news at this point.
And so you processed 2,501 envelopes. How many have we received so far? Is it more than that, or?
No, we've processed everything we've received so far, except for the one accessible vote center we have back in this corner. As those people come in today, those envelopes won't get scanned until tomorrow because these people will be finished and gone before they close shop today at the end of the day.
Okay.
So we usually take that as a group of cover. But yesterday we had 3 envelopes. So not a lot of usage of this document here at this point.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Wheeler? Equipment sounds like it's working fine.
It is. The only thing we've noticed with the equipment is we have a percentage of envelopes that we have to run a second time. When it's full speed, they're kicking out. When we run it slower, they run just fine. The difference between this year, this election, and April, I think, is one of 2 things. The vendor increased the performance on the system in between, and that may be causing the speed to be a problem, because when we hand feed them slow, they don't kick out as much. The other possibility that I'm kind of toying with is humidity. The humidity is much, much different right now. The envelopes that are in the drop boxes, for example, you can tell they've been in an outside area. Even though they're not wet, they definitely feel heavier and different. So we're reporting what's happening to the vendor. It's not causing any significant delays because we can easily rerun them, and they're usually small. we'll experiment with that and make some adjustments as needed if we need to identify whether it's a humidity issue or a speed calibration issue.
Okay, Mr. Dunbar.
For anyone that remembers, how many votes during the last election did we get from West Anchorage from this district total?
Oh, I don't have the numbers on that one.
We'll have to look at it for you.
I'm curious. I'm wondering. Yeah, I'm curious to see how it compares. Did we do any kind of projection on how many votes we expected in the special election?
Well, we know we sent out about 36,000. I think I said 20% was my number.
So you're thinking
Ballpark.
7,200?
Hopefully we'll be wrong and it'll be higher, but I don't know for sure.
Oh, 72.
That would be
I think it's going to be higher. If
It would
it's
be 3 times what we have now, and usually
it rushed,
half the votes come in the last couple of days, typically.
and we still got what?
2
2
weeks.
weeks. So it looks like it's going to come in over that.
And there was just an article in the paper talking about this election yesterday, so some people may have been reminded that it's ongoing, that we're not paying real close attention, or could possibly have been out of town fishing or camping or something.
Could someone remind me what the total percentage was in the last election?
36.
36. I imagine West was probably performed a little bit better than the average. I know it performs better than the standard.
Yes, typically does.
Yeah.
Some precincts better than others, but... Okay, any additional questions about the election, ongoing West Anchorage election update?
Was the 36% area-wide percentage in West Anchorage?
Thank you, Mr. Gates. So let's get an outreach and education communication plan update from Carolyn Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason why I wanted to, I guess, put this on the agenda again, or suggest for it to be on the agenda again, is because there's been a snag in the money that we're proposing to spend on Facebook boosting posts. I have the communication plan from the last time that we met, and nothing has changed in it, but it is here for reference if anybody would like to see it. I guess I'll just kind of pass it around just in case the off chance that you want to refer to it. We were planning on spending about $500 to $600 on boosted Facebook posts that specifically target the zip codes of West Anchorage. In the time since the April election and the special election, Facebook has changed its posting policies and political ad policies based on the issues that they've been facing at the federal level. So there are 2 things having to do with this. If I were to boost the Facebook political post, I would say this political post sponsored by the municipal businesses, which is a political issue. And I believe because it would say that we would be paying for a political ad, that there's some issues with ethics or legality with it. But even before we were to press that part of the issue, when it comes to being authorized to pay for a Facebook boosted post, boosted political post, Facebook wants my home address in order to mail a postcard to me with a verification confirmation code on it, and they want the last 4 digits of my social security number, neither of which I'm willing to provide from a personal standpoint. And I hope you can understand why, because Facebook clearly has issues managing data, personal data, and I don't subject myself to potential issues there. So it's kind of a 2-pronged issue that we're handicapped by with this election, where I don't know how we can necessarily spend money to target through Facebook anyways, that particular West Anchorage number.
So they don't accept some sort of post from the municipality of Anchorage, or how about the Ethics and Election Committee? Would that?
We could attempt to, so every time you pay for an ad through Facebook, it goes through this background authorization process. And through April, Facebook was like, yeah, heck yeah, give us your money. And now at this point, they are flagging content that is elections related or politically related. And if you want to post something that is politically related, it is going to say on it, on a banner to you, the consumer, this political ad paid for by the municipal clerk's office. So there's that issue, but then also, even if we wanted to go to that point and say that we were okay with, and legally and ethically okay with moving forward with that, Facebook wants to, they have to authorize us as someone who can place and buy a political ad. And that's where they demand from me the last four of my social security number as well as my home address.
Mr. Dunbar and then Mr. Wheeler.
So, Facebook is just one digital tool. Why not use Google AdWords or something like that?
We can certainly move forward with that, and I'm open to doing that. I was thinking that Facebook specifically targets that particular demographic with little room for error in confusing the other parts of the neighborhood. Because looking ahead, the primary election is right around the corner. People believe that they're going to get the ballots.
My understanding is that Google allows you to target by zip code as well. I'm mistaken. I haven't purchased ads typically, but I'm fairly certain that they allow you to target that level of specificity. So, you know what I mean? Like the ads that pop up when they're reading an article, for example,
Yeah.
you can set it so that if someone's reading the ADN, only people in this area will get those ads. But
Okay. Mr. Wheeler?
Karen, do you know if that process would allow you to put in the Muni's EIN and City Hall address instead of personal social?
They ask for your social security number and they ask for your residence address.
Might be interesting to see if they accept it and put in the Muni's last four of its EIN.
Yeah, because the employer identification number, I mean, they're all different. So each employer has a specific number that only they are assigned. So, the reason they're doing it, I would assume, is they're trying to cover themselves so they don't get in hot water in the future and don't get a lot of negativity created from problems with like they had with the last presidential election. So I can certainly understand why they're doing what they're doing. But on the other hand, people have become so accustomed to seeing ads and getting information through Facebook that it does sort of limit us as to how effective advertising in other venues would be.
I think
Amy?
Oh, there might be, through the chair, there might be a snag with attaching Facebook to the Muni because you have to sign up through your own personal, and then you're assigned as an account person for that. And so Twitter is a little different. Twitter, you can sign up with the muni.org email. It's through elections@muni.org. But through Facebook, it's through your own personal. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it wants your last four of your social and your own personal address. So I don't know if that would necessarily work.
So would Twitter be effective, or would we have to target people with Twitter accounts in West Anchorage, and is that even
it
possible?
doesn't have the penetration that Facebook doesn't encourage. Instagram has better. Instagram's owned by Facebook. Do they have the same ad policy?
I don't know. We have a Instagram account that has been dormant since 2014.
People do use Instagram. Yeah, it seems to be much more popular. Twitter is like basically just journalists and politicians. The occasional.
And so when you said we, you mean the Muni of Anchorage on the Instagram account?
Meaning the municipal clerk's office.
Clerk's office, I see. Well, yeah, you might want to try that to see if it's still considered active. And maybe that would be one way to get the information out.
I'll connect with Amy and see if there's a way to retrieve a password. Since the person who may have set it up likely is not this office. On another note, Amy Solberg put me in connection with the deputy clerk of the city of Valdez, and she's very well spoken and well versed and well researched with social media. And based on what she was filling me in on, it does sound like her hands are tied to Facebook. But at the will of the committee, I will definitely pursue
Mr. Dunbar?
ads.
Oh, I was saying that's fine. Not a huge fan of Facebook anyway. Let's try to use some other avenue.
So, yeah, well, if it's going to continually be a problem going forward with Facebook, then we probably need to find another venue, and maybe Instagram's one we try next, and if that doesn't work, then maybe Google Ads might work. But, so I guess we're sort of doing a little experimenting during this special election right now to see if we can figure out a way to get the word out that actually reaches the people. It's obviously the goal is to communicate that there is this election going on, and you have this ballot that you got in the mail, you may as well use it. Yes, ma'am.
If I may just add, the next door neighbor app to hit West Anchorage.
We have been using that less judiciously than we did in April, and we actually just put out a post to the affected neighborhoods yesterday, letting people know that if they have received their ballots, that they should contact us. And we received a handful of comments and questions from that. So we plan to continue to do that.
You can actually purchase ad space there too, right?
And this is on the next door? All right. And that was Natalie Wilson speaking. Thank you. Anything else on this particular item on our agenda, the outreach and education for this special election? All right, let's go to the next thing is Election Commission member qualifications. And I believe Mr. Gates is going to give us some information about that.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So, thank you to our attention and Ms. Solberg and realized that our election commission, we have 5 seats, but we only have 3 current members. And talking to the mayor's staff who recruits and appoints members, we said it's very difficult to recruit people who qualify, who meet the qualifications. And so the qualifications in our code, which is section 28, 120, 130, and I guess Ms. Solberg distributed an ordinance from a couple of years ago, A 2017-4 as amended, and in this one, it originated from Mr. Pearson. Qualifications were added to the intent that election commissioners be highly qualified, and that we'd be able to retain them in the long term. However, I guess given the circumstances, I thought that we should just soften the qualifications a little bit, not too much. So I drafted an ordinance. I'm going to have my own copy of it if I can. And I apologize, this should have a draft watermark on it. So I drafted this ordinance for 2 purposes. So one is, the document I'm looking at now has A218 and a blank at the top. So it's not numbered, it's not submitted yet. Okay. So this has 2 purposes. One is to allow remote participation of election commissioners, and I'll get to that in a second. And another is to soften the qualifications just a little bit. So on the second page, you see suggested some changes from what was added a couple years ago to, instead of saying the commissioners, members of the commission must have 1, 2, 3, 4, and A on page 2, it says are preferred but not required to have this experience participating in election work. And I also deleted through at least 2 election cycles, and instead just saying you must have served as an official within the last 5 years, and not saying within 2 election cycles. So I basically just looked at what we could perhaps reduce a little bit without taking out a lot of the work that was put in a couple of years ago. And so I basically just drafted this as Candy's consideration and without comments and so forth. This hasn't been submitted or anything to the agenda, and that might be something that we want to submit in the near future. So the second part of this draft ordinance, in section 2 at the bottom of page 2, it just adds new subsection B, and this would allow election commissioners to participate by telephone when they're exercising adjudication functions. And this came up because the public session of canvass is an adjudication of ballots, and ballots that might be rejected or accepted because of some issues. It is an adjudication. Mr. Gumbo.
Thank you. Just getting back to definitions here, reading through your revised version. What does it exactly mean to be an election official? So, Amy's an election official, presumably. Are our poll workers election officials?
Yes, they are.
Well, that's interesting. That means that vote by mail is going to produce significantly fewer election officials going forward from whom to poll.
That's correct.
So that would militate in favor of passing something like this to expand the pool from which we can draw folks.
Right, because if we're already having troubles, and 5 years from now, the state has even gone to vote by mail, there'll be only a half a dozen polls open citywide, or maybe even less than that. And so the number of workers that have polling experience will become extremely limited going forward. So I think preferred but not required makes perfect sense to me in line 7 there on page 2. And the fact that we were just talking about allowing people to participate telephonically, that's something that we are allowed to do on all of our committees and also for assembly meetings. And so I would think that this makes perfect sense to me, especially, I mean, these people are volunteers to be on this commission. They don't get paid to be on this commission, I don't believe. So to get enough people to fill out the 5-person board, we might have to allow them to participate telephonically. Did you have something to add, Mr. Weaver, or a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a possible suggestion is that in A3, serve as an election official within the state of Alaska. Another suggestion would be to expand that so that they've been an election official in any
In another state?
Yeah. It's just that basic exposure to the internal side of the election process that's very helpful as a commissioner to understand how ballots are cast and adjudicated.
So that's a possible amendment that you might want to add to your draft for us to consider when we present this to the Assembly.
Sure. Since it's a draft, it's not amending, you can just make changes that you recommend.
Right.
That makes good sense to me. I wanted to also respond to what you said about telephonic participation. It's true that a lot of boards and the Assembly you can participate by telephone. That's generally when you're not exercising adjudicatory functions. So Title 4 of our code, it has a section, and that's in the whereas paragraphs at the beginning. 40560F, it requires physical presence when some boards are exercising adjudicatory functions. And as an example, the Board of Equalization, if someone appeals their value of their property, they appear before the board and they have evidence of why the valuation of the board or of the assessors too great or too low, and present evidence and so forth. The board would want to evaluate that evidence in front of them and perhaps testimony of experts that appear, credibility, their demeanor. Those kind of concerns aren't really present in terms of evaluating evidence and witnesses when you're looking at or doing the public session of candidates, which is basically the election commissions. I don't want to say it's the sole adjudicatory function, but it's the one that stands out the most. So there's a little distinction then. And it's still adjudicatory in terms of looking at each ballot that's been challenged or that the clerk has multiple rejections. So, but it seemed very important that they be able to participate by phone, and with those reduced concerns for evaluating evidence, I thought that we would at least ensure that the person participating by phone has a true and correct copy of whatever they need to view in terms of the ballot envelope.
Right.
So I made sure we included that language down there in subsection D.
Yeah, I saw that.
Line 41.
Right. Yeah, that would make sense if they're reviewing ballots, that they would have to be able to view a copy of that ballot electronically if they're calling into the meeting.
Does this address some of the concerns, I guess, that you brought about having commissioners participate by phone? That's what I wondered.
Through the chair, yes, it does.
All right. Any other details you wanted to point out about this draft, Mr. Gates?
Let's see. I think I ran through most of it. That's basically it.
Okay. Well, I think it's important for us to have the full election commission, 5 members, to review ballots. Having 3 at least is an odd number, so there won't be a tie if they have to try to figure out whether they're going to count a specific ballot or not. But I think by next April would be nice if we had gotten a couple of more people on that board, so we'd have the full 5-person board available to review ballots next April.
I guess there was one other point, if I may. In Title 4, it says how you count the quorum, and you need to count the quorum based on the total number of seats, not the number of seats that are filled. So, 5 seats, you need all 3 of the current members to appear, or you won't have a quorum.
Right. And that would make sense. If you only had 2 people from the election commission and they disagreed on a specific ballot, you would have a tie, and that wouldn't work anyway. So it's important to have an odd number. Any other comments or questions about this item on our agenda, the election commission member qualification?
What's the time frame in terms of getting it introduced and passed?
Mr. Gates?
Well, since I guess we only have a minor change to make to this, that we could submit it in time now. If you wanted to get it done soon, I guess it could be added to the addendum if you wanted to rush it. But if not, then introduce at the August 14th.
August 14th?
meeting, except for
I prefer it be on the regular agenda.
Yeah, let's plan
I
on.
don't think there's an urgency to get this done now for this special election, public session and campus
No,
processes.
in contrast to the other resolution.
Yeah, I think this one we can do by August 14th will be timely enough. Okay, and let's add one additional item to our agenda here and talk about the canvass for this specific August 7th special election. And Mr. Gates, did you want to speak about that?
Well, generally, this one,
This resolution right here, right?
Yes.
we had, I guess, unexpected absence of some of the election commission members. So for the August 24th public session of canvass, and that date was in the resolution that called for the special election, and so to change it, we amend that prior resolution. That's why this was necessary, and that's basically all it does. It moves it back to August 17th. Now, that kind of follows the timeline, typical timeline historically for the election process. The regular election last April was held August, I get the dates right, 3rd, and the public session of canvass 10 days later, August 13th. So when we originally called the special election here, I think we put that public session of canvass out a week more because there was enough time for the Assembly's regular meeting on August 28th. Anyway, so we saw because of the unavailability of some election commission members, we need to move the date back. I asked to put this on the agenda, thinking the committee might want to review and make a recommendation to the full Assembly. But since we don't have a quorum today for the committee, I don't think you can actually do that. But I could say we've got it today, and I just wanted to make sure that this committee got to see it before the meeting Tuesday night. It will be on the consent agenda, so you could pull it to talk about it. We'll just let pass.
And so currently, the canvass is set for August 7th, is that correct?
24th.
Or is this going to be, it's on the 24th?
Yeah, and then that date doesn't work. You have 2 commission members who would be unavailable that day.
But on the 24th, we'll have enough commission members available on that day?
On the 17th.
Or the 17th?
Yes.
We're moving it up.
I didn't see the 17th on here.
At the bottom of the first page.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Oh, here it is.
Section 1.
So, yeah, at the bottom, page 1 now.
All right, see it. Line 39.
So we initially had set it, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dunlap.
We initially set it as far out as possible, if memory serves, because I didn't want to overburden the clerk's office. This is all pretty fast. We had some absences, but legally we could have done it on the 17th or the 24th, or I think any period in between there. And so, it's not going to impact the propriety of the vote. It's not going to challenge anything legally. It's just sort of a not a formality, but it's just moving the public data canvas within the legal range.
And so, Mr. Wheeler, all the votes you will be tabulated and by that date without any problem, you think?
Mr. Chairman, all the votes will be tabulated except for those that were in the pending status for commissioners to make a decision. Those that they decide are good, we'll run those immediately at the same time period, and then we'll report those additional results out immediately after the meeting.
And then so the final results will be available for certification on our meeting on August 28th then, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Dunlap?
Just one more note, Mr. Chairman, in my conversation with Dean. So there might be a very small number of votes that won't count, that might have counted, and that would be the ones that would have come in between, say, the 18th and the 24th. And that's fully 11 days after the election occurred. But in theory, if somebody mailed it on the day of the election and then it got delayed 12 or 13 days before it arrived to us.
Or they were
that
mailing
vote-
from overseas somewhere.
Yeah, or they were mailing from overseas. Although, so what was the date of canvass for the election, the regular election that we did?
It was on, through the chair, April 13th, so 10 days after.
So this is the same legal standard as, it's the same length as the regular election. We had just proposed an extra long one for the special election. Now we're going back to
The regular 10 days.
regular 10 days.
Okay. Yeah, it would make sense that we try to stay consistent. So, 10 days would be the standard going forward at this point.
Yeah, I think it would be nice to have a little more time just to let our clerk's office not have to work so hard, frankly. And we aren't hiring as many staff for this as a normal election.
But we don't appear to be inundated with ballots at this point.
No, and the clerk's office has assured to me that they can do this in this time frame.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Wheeler.
the point that Mr. Dunbar is making is a good one to keep in mind because we do have ballots trickling in from overseas locations well after we close the election. We've received some from the April election in the last couple of weeks, amazingly enough. Why that is, it's not 100% clear, but typically they are all overseas, and there's some issues there in chasing down that voter or
So they
getting
were
returned.
that they were postmarked
And some
before
of them are
election day?
postmarked in time, yes,
Wow.
absolutely. So clearly, if there's things that we can do in the future to speed things up. For example, at the state level, their ballots go out 45 days before the election to help in that process. We don't have that kind of time frames currently in our code, I don't think, to make without a lot of structural changes in terms of how we put ballot propositions and so on.
Right.
But that's something to keep in mind that there will be some small percentage of these ballots that are postmarked in time, but just come in too late for the process.
And so should we encourage people that might be overseas in, say, a rural area to maybe try to FedEx their ballots back so they get back in time to be counted?
Through
Or?
the chair, I think maybe Carolyn can speak to this stuff too, but we do encourage people, if they haven't gotten a ballot in time, or if they're worried about getting it back to us in time, we have alternatives, fax being best in terms of being most secure and most private, but there's also email voting right now, which the state is no longer going to do, and we may decide no longer to do because of security reasons, but
Right.
currently it's available. FedEx is another option, certainly. But
Oh, so it might
in a
be.
tight situation in the deadline room, I think that even the fax option may be really good. If that person doesn't have that kind of access, then I would say email. FedEx is last.
As long as fax are continued to be used, I wonder how much longer that will happen, That may go the way of the Pony Express someday. But, so that may be something this committee might want to continue to discuss at future meetings. Okay, anything else about the election calendar and the canvass changing to August 17th? Any old business that someone has thought of that we need to discuss here at this point in this committee meeting? I guess we're to the audience participation part of the meeting. Are you ready to participate? All right, Mr. Hagelin.
My name is Eugene Carl Wood. I represent myself as far as the public process. Public process is an appropriate decision made by the governing body to elect the public interest. I live in Massachusetts Valley, but know that I've been doing all the public process. I'm on 7 years, a long time. A lot of elections have gone by. Now, what do I begin? We're with the forum. This idea of not moving the forum to have the meeting. I witnessed it here out in the valley where there was a board, and the clerk came down and told them, you can't have a meeting unless you have a quorum. Period. And that was the borough clerk coming down on board. That's what they do. This is new to me to see that the semi-attorney, prior to starting the meeting, advising the chair that it was okay to have this meeting without a quorum, except he couldn't make a decision. Now, the other thing, I couldn't help but notice, I'm glad I was at this meeting. Anything could happen here. But the idea of telephonic scenario with the commission members really, really concerns me. And I plan to take this on the road to even proposal of the idea to do. I witnessed election commission meetings over the years, their work sessions and so forth. They need to have a hard envelopes if they're dealing with ballots, whatever, not something passed on a copy over by a copy of a copy. We're dealing with whether commissioners feel that these ballots should be counted or not. And this is not the way to go. And this is all new to me. I never thought we would get to this stage, but we're getting to this stage now. The third thing I'd like to say is this. Part one is it's audience introductions, and it's not everyone here. It should have a roll call of who's present, of the members of the assembly. Okay, a simple thing like that. Then audience introduction, not just simply audience, just introductions. That's what I recommended before, and I have been recommending on. I still don't do that. And the most important thing is everyone present, both the public and those who are presiding over this meeting, need to hear each other. And with this noise, we saw machinery going on during this thing, and I had to say to Dennis, please speak louder. I've advised you so many times, you should not have these meetings in this headquarters scenario. You needed to, and look how we have now gone to election machinery going out over there in the back. It's beyond the voices, but the machinery itself. And we cannot hear each other. How do you all expect the tapes that are being recorded to hear this thing? And I guess that ends with me 9 seconds to spare. Any questions, except for one thing? I expect that when I finish, you're going to do a policy on difference and adjourn this meeting, end the story without any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any comments before I adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
We're adjourned.